Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Hello everybody and welcome to Ask Rob and Rob, the show where you get your questions in and we enthusiastically answer them each and every week. This week, of course, is no different. We've got two great questions coming up. But before we get to those questions, let's give you a quick reminder of how you can get your question onto the show.
Oh yes, nothing's changed on that front. All you've got to do is call 013 808 0035. That's 013 808 0035. Or you can go to propertyhub.net/ask. Either method gives you the ability to leave us a voicemail with your question and your name. Leave us your name or we're going to make one up for you, just like we're about to now for Arthur.
Hi, Rob and Rob. Love the podcast. I've just sort of discovered it and gone back to the catalogue and finding loads of great information. I wanted to ask you a question about buying a home to live in and having a lodger. I'm thinking about leaving London for Manchester where I can afford a 2-bedroom terraced house, a nice one. And my problem is I sort of keep waiting and waiting for prices to drop or crash. And I just wonder, because it's going to be a home that I live in, should I not really care as much? Because I intend on sort of making a little bit of money through having a lodger in the second room. And am I sort of waiting too long, waiting for this crash that may not come? And should I just have the confidence to get on with it and just go up and do it? Obviously, the fear is that as soon as I do, a month later, there's a huge crash or whatever. But yeah, I'd love to know what you think. If I'm being too hesitant because I am getting fed up waiting, or should I just head on up there and, through the property cycle teaches us, if there is a crash, it will recover, and I plan on living there anyway, so should I just get on with it? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Arthur. Strong name, by the way. Like it. I really like this question because a lot of people will be contemplating this in general, not just for their own homes, but for property investments as well. And it's easy with the world being a bit weird at the moment to feel this way. I'm not surprised you've put this question forward. But here's the thing. Let's just talk about property in general, and then we'll talk about buying your own home. Property prices in general, most years go up. If you look at the data, this is not me, feeling positive about property. The data shows you, and data from hundreds of years shows you this as well, that property prices in this country go up most years. Now, occasionally there is a crash, and that crash can be quite substantial. But when you look at the crashes, it tends to happen roughly once in every 18 years. So if you're picking a year to invest, are you picking one of those years? Now, you could be, but the chances are you're probably not. And we don't believe it is one of those years. If you've listened to our predictions episode recently, we actually believe you'll see modest growth. So you could say, well, that's the case, but why don't I just hang on for the crash and then buy? Well, actually, you'll end up costing yourself more money. And here's why. Because if the market crashes by 15%, but you buy now and for the next 4 years it grows by 5%, well then you've missed out. But what tends to happen before a crash is a surge. You have to have property prices go up to crash from. And we've not had that surge yet. So you would expect before a crash a surge. So then you would really miss out because actually the surge lasts for quite a long time. If you're a bit geeky, you might want to go back and look at the data for the last cycle, which ended in 2008. And you can see that if you'd invested in 2001, 2, 3, 4, and even 5, you would have been fine. 2006, after the crash, you would have broken even, and you would have lost money if you've invested in late 2006 or 2007. Of course, that's the average property, and it will depend on the area, and it will depend on the type of property you've invested in, but that should give you confidence that the majority of years leading up to the last crash were absolutely fine to invest in. And then, if you invested in 2009, well, then you did really well, even though nobody wanted to invest then, and then every year since then. So that covers property prices in general. But when it comes to your own home, of course you don't want to buy at the peak of a market cycle when property prices are going to crash. But ultimately it should matter less because this is your own home. Property prices over the long term will go up, and people tend to buy their own properties for the long term. If you're looking to buy a property and get out of it in the next couple of years, you shouldn't buy it unless you're going to be adding value to it, because all the transaction costs around purchasing and selling a property will wipe out any modest gains you've got. So you should rent if you're planning on moving again within the next couple of years. There may be emotional reasons why you want to live in the property, but actually if you are not settled yet and you're going to carry on moving, then renting financially is a better option for you in most cases. You can still look to get a flatmate instead of a lodger and reduce costs that way. But if you're on the move, then consider renting. If you are buying with the intention of staying for a few years, then the property prices shouldn't matter as much, because even if next year property prices do crash, in a not too distant future, they'll recover to where you were. So it doesn't need to be a big scary thing. Quite a lot for you to take in there, Arthur, and everybody else listening, but hopefully that gives you food for thought.
Fabulous answer there. Now let's see if we can repeat the trick for Will.
Hi, Rob. It's Will. First of all, thanks for a great podcast, but I'm going to ask a bit of a personal question. It'd be really great if you could answer it. I'm interested to know about your asset allocation. So obviously I know you guys are absolutely massive on property, which obviously I am as well, but I'm interested to know, do you guys put anything towards your ISA each year, or are you just so 100% pro-property that you don't think it's necessary to fill up your tax-free ISA and obviously gain some tax-free investment returns? Obviously, that's a big if you do achieve those returns. Yeah, it'd be great to know your answers. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you, Will. Interesting question. And I'll directly answer what you asked, then broaden it out a bit, because I think that's more interesting. Yes, I do fill up my ISA each year. I just treat it super passively because I'm very interested in the stock market. I know a reasonable amount about it, but I don't have the time to actively manage it. So just put the money in there and forget about it and never really look at it. But that doesn't tell you anything about what you should do. I'm in a position where I can do that and still buy the property I want to. But what if you need to make a choice between doing one or the other? Well, the key thing here is to be mindful of tax, but not let tax guide your decisions. So for anything you put in an ISA, you don't have to pay tax on the income, and you also don't have to pay any tax on the capital growth, and that's fantastic. So if you are able to get equivalent returns in an ISA versus something that's not in an ISA, of course, you'd go for the ISA every time. But residential property, you can't put in an ISA. It'd be wonderful if you could, but at the moment you can't. So you need to make that choice between making that property investment and investing in the ISA. If you can make pre-tax investments in your ISA that you reckon will come out ahead of the post-tax results that you get from buying a property, then you should do that. But chances are you're listening to a podcast about property, so you'll probably think you'll either do better in property or you're more interested in property. In which case, you should probably do that. Of course, the best thing to do, if you can, is to diversify and do both. Just because this is the property podcast doesn't mean that we believe that absolutely all of your net worth should be in property. Having a bit of diversification is good, but the reality of it is that buying property is expensive. It takes a lot of money to save up for a property. So for a lot of people, when you're in the stage of trying to build up your portfolio, you're going to end up having what a financial advisor would consider a very lopsided portfolio, where perhaps everything is in property for a period of time. And then that diversification comes later when you built up that portfolio and you're realizing the income from it. And that's fine. So I think it's really important to be aware of the impact on tax and be aware that property is disadvantaged compared to some other assets when it comes to tax. And yes, if you're going to be investing in the type of thing that you could put in an ISA, then having the ability to put it in an ISA is a big plus. And yes, it is use it or lose it every year. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're missing out by not using it. If property is what you want to do, if you've got goals, if you've got a plan, if you've worked out the numbers, and if the numbers that you can get from property will get you to where you want to be, then focus on that. That is okay too.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Will, and thank you, Arthur, for your questions. And thank you for listening. We'll be back on Thursday with the Property Podcast. So until then, everybody, take care of yourselves. Have fun. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.